So, here we go. I'm going to start by introducing Mike. Now, I've known Mike for, how long have I known you, bud?
2 years.
Too long? Sorry, 2 years?
2 years. Yeah, I think 2 years.
So I said too long for a second. No. And tell me, I've got to appreciate, we've talked on obviously in a professional way with this sort of stuff, but also got to know you personally. What is your qualifications and your experience so that you've got the right to talk to us about counselling and healthy thinking and healthy mental health, that stuff?
Yeah, so qualifications-wise, I mean, just a little bit of background was when I was 14, I was invited to a Christian camp, got involved with working with young people, and even at that stage I started seeing pain with leaders and young people that were coming from dysfunctional families. And so many years on, I decided working in Christian ministry, you don't get paid as a volunteer. I don't know if you know that, but I decided to channel my direction, and it was counselling. And I went into counselling, so I've done a Bachelor of Counselling. After that, I was successful in getting a fantastic position working at Sky City Casino, which most people think is really bizarre, but I was actually a PR entertainment person on the floor. But what no one actually knew was if I was seeing people in pain or hitting the machines hard or betting big money, I'd pull them off the floor, take them down to the cafe and spend an hour or two counselling them, and most of them would self-ban. They never actually knew I was doing that, but I did that for 2 years and I absolutely loved it, and that tweaked my interest in addictions. So I worked 3 years in mental health working with addictions, did a postgrad in drug and alcohol studies, and I've just recently completed a certificate in supervision as well.
Wow.
So quite a vast range of experience in mental health and addictions and working with young people.
I better not tell him any more of my secrets. Now I've got a new one that's psychotic. Do you think from your training in counselling that Christians really reflect the abundant life that Jesus spoke of in John 10?
I struggle with this one. I want to say no. Now, admittedly, I'm a Christian counsellor, so I see mostly Christians come through my office. But having said that, Christians make up the bulk of my clients through brokenness, confusion around God, confusion around spirituality, loss of salvation, a whole lot of stuff. And it raises the question that if we are meant to have the truth, why are there so many people that are broken in the church? Why is there so much confusion? And I think about putting on the mind of Christ. What does that actually mean? And as I mentioned with that little illustration, Jesus' value when he walked the earth wasn't in what the Pharisees and people thought of him. It was in his Father's eyes. And if we can incorporate that, I'm sure the church will have a better mental and emotional health when we understand what God thinks of us rather than the pressures of what society expects of us.
Well, really, you've answered the next question, which is what does mental wellness look like? So what you're saying is mental wellness is primarily built on the foundation of how does God see me, not how does everyone else value me.
Absolutely, and that raises the other aspect of, I think, self-awareness. Anything to do with the scriptures and that, I think, is about promoting self-awareness. Why do we act the way we do? Why do we react the way we do? Why do we seem to get so upset by what someone else has said when it's actually perfectly fine for someone else to have a different opinion? Because that's how we journey as a people together. My experience of my family is different to every single other person's here. So it's okay that I'm different. But it's about combining those experiences based on the truth to move forward together.
What are the main areas of your thinking that create mental unwellness? What do some of these areas look like that cause this problem within Christianity?
Well, with my training, I've also undergone training with David Riddell in Living Wisdom, and I'm the presenter of A Bay of Plenty. But what I've found is we use terms, I've found his language and terms really good, like we have things we class unbearable feelings. And that is that we give ourselves permission to recognise that there is something within us that is actually so unbearable, more often than not, usually established from when we're young, because as children we're very good, I don't know if you know, but children are very good observers but very poor interpreters of situations. And if we carry that on throughout our lives, it can cause us great pain. But when there is something that is unbearable, that is why we react, and people react and get angry or get violent to that, because it's so unbearable they don't want to be around this feeling. When we recognise that, it's the first step, because once we recognise it, we can dismantle it to making it something uncomfortable And we can all live with a little bit of discomfort in our lives, but we can't live with things that are unbearable. There's also aspects of what we call welds. Welds are when we get two concepts or ideas that are actually completely poles apart, and we put them together in our subconscious, and it causes us incredible pain. One of the biggest ones I've ever come across is welding the idea of subjugation to submission. Submission is the freedom of choice to respect another person's opinion, or you submit to each other in marriage. Subjugation is slavery. But some people say when I submit to another person, I lose my freedom of choice and I must do everything they tell me. That's subjugation. And learning that and breaking that apart breaks strongholds in people's minds and hearts. And then there's other things like echoes, learning that there might be something from the past that's being projected in our mind to today. It could be as simple as smelling a fragrance or something and just reacting and having to run out of the room. It's again beginning to unpack and learning about who we are and why we do the things we do.
I find I do a little bit of counselling here, and one of the things I find inside of the subject is, especially with those who I deal with who are on addiction, is most of the time the self-medication exists simply because they want to hide away from their UBS, their unbearable feelings.
Absolutely.
And it becomes a habit, but it was originally escape. And so I can see that. Why do you think some people fear change and hide behind their faith, which keeps sick thinking and sick beliefs? And this is a really important question for me. I struggle with understanding how sometimes people recreate faith to hide their pain behind.
It's human nature to want to. I think there was a bigger question than what I got addressed with, so I'm just unpacking it. I was meant to put you on the spot, not the other way around. Payback. I think that generally human nature is that our brain at a scientific level creates grooves and pathways. Once those pathways are established, it's very hard to change. So anything to do with change promotes an area of discomfort. Human nature, and I see this in addictions, that it's actually usually people define that it's easier to stick with what they've always done than to actually go through the change process because it's uncomfortable. Even though it's destroying our lives, destroying our relationships, and we can see evidence of that, it's still a matter that some people, or for many people, they have to just stick with what they've always done because it's actually easier, even though it's so dysfunctional to their lives. Hiding behind faith, though, just unpacking that, I think it's very easy, and this is something we'll look at a bit with toxic religion tonight as well, is that it's very easy to put back onto God the decisions or the circumstances that are happening to us, and voiding effectively our responsibility or our contribution to the situation. So the extreme of that is when, it's God's circumstances for everything in our lives rather than what we do. And so I suppose just in generally in society, I see it on the news all the time. Methamphetamine users stand up in court and say it wasn't me, it was the drugs that made me do it. And they start to get away with it. And I think it's just human nature that to accept responsibility for our lives is not comfortable. So we usually want to find something else to carry that responsibility. Those of you that have teenagers most probably notice that about teenagers. That transition.
So my last question before Christine's got some questions for you, and then you can hit us with your questions, is explain the power of truth to gain good mental, emotional health. What would be a scriptural teaching for this?
So scriptural teaching, one of the main verses which I started to dive into and did a bit of an exegesis with, and that was Romans 12:2. It was always a catchphrase that we used in Living Wisdom, or Romans 12:1 and 2. Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, present yourselves as living sacrifices. And that goes on to say, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the removal of your mind. By the renewal of your mind.
My mind was removed years ago.
I fall into that one every time. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Now, when you actually go back to the Greek and Hebrew, the definition for renewal is actually metamorphosis. Now, it's fascinating because I was out with my little 21-month-old daughter the other day. She loves our caterpillars and butterflies, the monarch butterflies. And I'm looking at the chrysalises on the plants, I'm thinking metamorphosis. Now, I don't know, but I wonder if there's any DNA similarity between a caterpillar and a butterfly. There is nothing that you would resemble them to be together. There is a transformation that happens. There is a metamorphosis. And on a real basic level, because I like my basic thinking, I could imagine ourselves before Christ sitting there as a caterpillar just getting on with life. And then if we actually transform our thinking and understand what God thinks of us, why couldn't we soar the skies like a butterfly? Why can't we take on a completely new perspective and view of this world? When we live in the old ways, we question and limit ourselves, but when we understand what God actually means for us, why can't we actually see life in a different way? I'm sure Jesus did.
Yeah.
So why can't we?
And the premises of this is a willingness. I notice that, if I can throw in a 5 cents there, in that scripture, if you look at the structure of it, it's not implied it will happen, it's implied you've got to buy into it.
Yes.
You be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It becomes an active thing that we buy into. And sometimes it is habitual in Christianity to turn and say, God changed my mind, God changed my mind. And God's saying, well, what about your part? What are you doing about this? Have you started thinking about better thinking? Word. So I love that. It's a good thought.
Mike. Oh, am I on? Yeah, thanks, Timmy. Mike, so last week we talked about mental health, and we explained some of the mental health disorders.
Yes.
And the struggle that people face with these. And also as a church, we were looking at having understanding or learning about this so that we could have understanding and bring that compassion and hope to ones that are suffering in this way. But as we look at helping others with their difficulties, there's some pitfalls to be aware of when helping others, such as, and I'll ask you a few questions just so that we can glean from him.
Yep.
What does rescuing look like when helping people?
Rescuing. Rescuing is actually when somebody is derailing the experience and the learning process for another person. Rescuing is when you step in and do something for other people they should be doing for themselves. Churches are very good at calling out being loving and compassionate and loving your brother. But you know what? I learned how to ride a bike because I learned how to fall off it and get my balance. If I had someone hold the bike for me all my childhood, I doubt I ever would have learned how to ride a bike. There is something that we must learn through experience. And so rescuing, the other thing that most people don't understand about rescuing is that if I try and rescue someone, it tells you more about me than it does the other person. It's actually, the extreme of rescuing is actually a subconscious idea, although this may be new to consider, but it's a subconscious idea that I want something from this person. I used to be a rescuer. In my youth group, I got the nickname Slave because I used to do everything for everyone because I didn't want them feeling pain or hurt, so I did everything. So I got the nickname Slave, and because I did everything for everyone. But what it ended up being was it was about me. When I realised years on it was about me wanting acceptance and I wanted appreciation and I wanted people to tell me how wonderful I was. That was my motivation, not actually helping other people. It was actually about me.
Okay. What's the difference between using boundaries and rescuing?
So rescuing is about the individual's determination to stop someone. A rescuer is someone who helps primarily for their own benefit. Boundaries are about protecting yourself and those people. I consider myself, I'm not a rescuer. I will help anyone who asks for help, but I'll put the boundaries in place. I don't allow people to ring me at any time in the night, and I don't allow people to arrive on my doorstep at any time, but they can ring and make an appointment and I'll do anything I can for them. So boundaries promote safety both for the other person and myself. Rescuing means that your agenda is controlled by everyone else because you feel that you have to. So does that answer it?
That was good. So boundaries are helpful for you and they're helpful for others.
Absolutely. Again, it's my story why we're looking at toxic religion. It's one of the things I see more often than not. People in ministry and pastors and people that I work with, putting boundaries in place seems to be impossible, because there's this idea and expectation that because we're Christians and we love people, we are available 24 hours a day. But usually, even if I get someone who's rung me and is suicidal, I always work in scales from 0 to 10. You know, where do you sit on the scale? 10 being extreme, 0 being pretty much irrelevant. If they say a 2 or 3, or a 4 or a 5, I say, is this something that can wait till Monday? I've never had anyone say no. They've all said, actually, yeah, I'm very comfortable waiting for Monday, knowing that I can talk to you about this. That's
Great.
boundaries.
Great. If we spiritualise everything, why is this unhelpful to a person?
Yeah, this was a bit of a curly one. I thought I could go for a while on this one. I think the summary really is, you know, I asked myself the question, or asked back the question, why give back to God what he's given us? In the sense that if we over-spiritualise everything, we get to a point where, isn't it almost to an extreme of fatalism, that I'm only here because God's controlling it. I don't have free will because God actually governs where I am and what happens. But, you know, it also, over-spiritualising, I think, creates a term which we call cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is usually the basis of why people go to counselling. And what it is there's two ideas they're opposing that actually hold some truth. We want to pray for people to get healing, but when they're not healed, we get confused, because there's two truths. People die. We're all going to die. But we're encouraged to pray for people for healing. But what happens if we don't see the healing? Do you hear both of them are true, but they cause us pain. And I know it. I didn't get overwhelmed by it, but I prayed for my dad the week before he died from a brain tumour, and he still died. And the reality is there's truths on both sides. And there's also over-spiritualising means we're trying to determine absolute truths, whereas I can sit back and to go, I'm comfortable not knowing all that God knows. I actually don't want to know all that God knows. I'm actually comfortable with the unknown, because that also allows me to grow and explore in my journey.
Great, and also it sounds to me that by being able to say that you've got a close relationship with God, and so that's why it's really important to have that close relationship with Him. Yeah,
absolutely.
So, what stops us facing our mental and spiritual unwellness in New Zealand church culture?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that contributes to this, but I do think one is, and I must admit this is my own sort of tang, so I'm sure you'll jump in if there's other aspects, but there's a term that we often use which is called an emotionally based reasoner. And for a lot of people, this is where we begin to allow our emotions to drive who we are. The problem is our emotions can lie to us. We've all been lying in bed at night and we hear a knock or a thud outside, and our brains can either sit there and go, maybe that's just something that fell over, or it's the cat running across the roof. We have 20 cats a night running over our roof, or it's the cat, or we go to the place, it's a burglar or something's going to happen, and we panic. So when we allow our emotions to define reality, it's a very dangerous place. Now, you know, and because emotions are there to guide us, not to define us. And I suppose the way I look at that now is with social media, especially with young people, with all sorts of things going on, and that we invite opinions for anything we put on social media, by anything we advertise. We invite criticism and opinions from anyone in the world. Now, if we allow our emotions to guide us, like one extreme was when I was doing entertainment a few years ago, I advertised magic shows in the local paper. I got 2 text messages. One was, the world's a better place without you, go shoot yourself in the face. Now, if I led emotionally based reasoning, I'd sit there and go, well, obviously I'm not a very nice person, maybe I need to reconsider who I am in this world. So emotionally based reasoning is allowing our emotions or our circumstances to dictate who we are, not just allowing people to have an opinion and not recognising. And just so you know, if someone says something like that, I sit there and go, well, that's a person who is obviously has no idea who I am, so their opinion means nothing. I only allow people that I give permission to speak into my life. But hopefully that sort of, you know, I think we're overly sensitive sometimes to what everybody thinks of us and what the impression. I could have come here thinking that I have to make everyone happy. I'm comfortable with 10% of you liking me. I think 10% of the world liking me is actually a very high enough ratio already. I'm comfortable with that, but
One of the things that I think about the emotional-based reasoning is that this is where we over-spiritualize. Where we see in the Word of God, it talks about the heart. And in the English modern culture, we're in, where you see that, we often interpret that as emotions. But in fact, in the Greek culture, and certainly in the Jewish culture, the heart was the center of your person, your integrity, your intelligence, your thinking. It was not your emotions, your guts, your bowels were the center of our emotions. So quite often we read into the Bible that God is really, 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 really laying everything on our emotions. And in fact, he's not. He's putting things onto truth, onto thinking, onto working out what is good from bad. And so for me, it was a very big thing when I discovered that some of the people I was talking with in counselling, they were stuck believing God had authenticated their emotions because it says about loving God with all your heart. And that they misinterpreted that as loving God with all your emotions, wherein my understanding of emotions is emotions are not the reality, they're merely your brain trying to work reality out.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of see emotions as chocolate, but not the cake.
Well, the analogy I usually use is your emotions should be your warning lights on the dashboard of your car. If you're emotionally based reasoner and the oil light flashes on, you have every right to scream and pull to the side of the road and scream to everyone in the car, we're going to die. That's not the case. It's a warning sign. It's there to be noted about things that might be changing or catastrophe in the future, but it's not there. It's there as a guide. It's not there as a compass or a bearing that you must follow. Well,
and then before we go into the next thing, on Friday, my brother-in-law's brother had passed away, and we went to his funeral there, and one of my nieces I bumped into, and she's a bit of a high flyer. She once would fly in the first class and take people all around the world as first class person for NZ, from New Zealand airport, whatever.
In New Zealand.
In New Zealand, that's it. Went blank there, I had a moment. But she said something to me. She's now currently involved in media. And she's laughed at me as she turned around and said, all we do, and she's a high flight, I can't tell you what company, she's about to finish here because she's done it for years and she's very successful. She said to me, what I find fascinating is how thick people are. They're so sheeple. I just need to do certain things and I can make them buy something, manipulate social media. And she said the big thing, and I'm employed to make the masses think in a particular way. And she's employed by companies and by groups to manipulate society. And she says, I do it all the time for good money. Emotional-based reasoning diminishes humanity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now it's your turn to put us on the hot seat.
Were you going to say something there?
Oh, no, Malcolm said it, so that's
cool.
yeah, and that's good.
I said it.
Yeah.
You did. Cool.
Let's begin. Now, how he's doing this, he's going to ask each one of us to answer one of the questions. You get to peek into our lives. I'm so sorry.
So one of the things that one of the courses I run with Living Wisdom is we talk about 12 fundamentals of mental emotional health. And I usually say to people in the school or in the course, if you take nothing else away, take these 12 fundamentals away and look at them. Learning these and taking ownership of them will actually take a lot of limitations off your life, and I believe will actually allow you to walk without the pressures or the stress or the self-talk of what many of us seem to carry within society. So the first one there which is going to be directed to Malcolm, is about accepting responsibility and the outcomes for our choices. How do you facilitate that in your life, please?
Well, I've lived long enough and been through enough that I absolutely believe in this. How am I going with that, accepting responsibility? I think that when you make choices, they're your fault, the good, and they're your glory. Sorry, when it's good, it's your glory. When it's bad, it's your own fault. And so I live with this reality that because of what I went through, and because I went through the suicidal stuff, and because I ended up in care, when I went through that and I was sitting with the counsellors and psychologists, someone said a very important statement to me: given all the things that have got you to where you are, all your thinking, all your actions, and all your emotions, why do you think it should be any different? And that hit me. And it was something I got from that was, you are exactly where you are today because of your good thoughts and your stupid thoughts. Stop blaming everyone else. And that really ripped into my soul, because it was actually in my rehabilitation, that was a real turn around And so for me, this is a principle of my life. I believe you must always accept responsibility because it's the only way you can go forward.
Absolutely. And no one's perfect.
No.
A good truth coach for that, which I give people, is it's okay to do things badly until you learn how to do them better. Because we all have to learn. We all have to be gentle on ourselves. I think it's really ironic that when you're young and you fall off a bike, everyone runs to help you and encourages you. But when you're an adult and you fall off a bike, people want to sit back and laugh. Why? We're still learning. What's the difference? It's the attitude of people and our beliefs or ideas rather than the actual individual. So that's cool. Christine, this is an interesting one. I'd almost love to ask Paul and Malcolm this one too, but we haven't got time. Do you have the ability to submit to correction?
Well, I am looking at Paul at the moment. Okay. To be honest, I actually find it really hard, and so I'm aware of that. And then I think to myself, I'm actually going to listen to what the person's saying, and although I'm finding it hard, I tell myself it's going to be okay. They've got a thought, they've got an opinion, and it may benefit me if I took it on board. But also, when someone's told me something, I need time to process it. Sometimes I've had one person say something to me and they were kind of demanding a response straight away. And so I gave that person a boundary and said, I actually need to think about it and I'll come back to you. Yeah. And then I know that I can work it through. If I'm struggling with what they've said, I pray about it. And I know that I can either accept what they've said and then work on that, or if I disagree, I can just think, well, actually, I disagree and I'm going to let it go. And that's my sovereignty in action. So I don't know if everyone knows that term, sovereignty. Could you explain that, Mike?
So personal sovereignty is something that a lot of people don't quite seem to grasp, or in my experience. Personal sovereignty is an individual's choice to self-determinate, either for good or for bad. I choose what I want. It's like salvation. I choose salvation or I don't. It's my choice. There's not a single person in the world that can force me to change the decision I've made. It's my personal sovereignty. And when we accept that, we accept our choices that contribute to aspects of our life and who we're becoming, then we take ownership of it, rather than, like we were talking before, blaming other people, blaming God. It's a much more healthier position. If I buy a car and it breaks down, I just take ownership of it and deal with it, rather than sitting there blaming the companies or the brand or whatever. I just get on with it. And I suppose what I'm coming back to as well is that a good truth coach, or a good way, I'm going to give little insights as we go along, is one that criticism or constructive criticism is merely feedback. I don't mind criticism, it's feedback. And when I get enough people saying the same thing, I make note of it and I start doing something about it. It's okay. There's nothing harmful. Paul and Christine and Malcolm are always giving me feedback. There's nothing harmful about it. They've never threatened me. I've never felt threatened. But it's feedback. And how do I grow as a person if I don't take criticism? All right, cool. And actually, just one other little thing. I won't do this every time, but I had this little idea of what you're saying. If someone is sitting out there and they're stewing over an idea, so they think, right, I need to talk to Paul and Malcolm, not picking on the leadership, and you've been sitting there thinking about it for 3 weeks. Imagine you're running a marathon, and when you come to address the issue with a person, you're already 3 weeks ahead on that running race. So when you decide you want an answer from those people right now, it's probably fair that if they turn around and say, can I have a week or two to think about it, they've got to play catch up and process. And I think that's fair. That's a little insight I thought about the other week dealing with my wife, because unfortunately for her, sometimes I go, here's what I've been thinking about, I want an answer now, and she looks like she's drowning. So I have to give her time to process. So that's just a little insight with that as well.
That's great.
Malcolm, how do you accept short-term pain? So the principle here is accepting short-term pain for long-term gain. Can you explain that and tell me how you do that, please?
Well, In our school, we had a motto, omne non de proficit de deficit. It's Latin, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. It's a little bit harsh, because in fact, sometimes not going forward can be a good thing if it's catching your breath and working out if this is the direction you should be going. But the principle I bought into at a very young age was that you have to pay the price in the immediate if you're going to become something of value later. I have a little saying, the best gardens in the world have crap in them. Dig it in, plant something and watch it grow. But you've got to dig it in. And so I am a great believer that if you really, really want to grow as a person, you've got to be willing to pay the price. But you pay the price in the correct direction, not in the incorrect direction.
Yep.
So you really do have to ask the question at the beginning, is the price I'm about to pay, the pain I'm about to suffer, in the correct direction? If you absolutely think it is, then push. Accept that it hurts. So what? Most of the time we're in bad places anyway, and we're already hurting. So I'd rather hurt going in the right direction than stay hurt in my misery.
Absolutely.
So in lean on de proficit de deficit, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards.
Yep.
So that's how I process this. I like to say, well, is this a real thing that needs to be paid? If it does, just pay it.
Yep.
Pay it now. It's better now than later.
Yep. And if you want to know the reality of short-term pain, long-term gain, join a gym. All right? The first 2-3 times you go there, you'll be wondering, what have I done? But it gets easier because it's all about short-term pain for your wellness in the long run, for long-term gain. Very good. All right. Another aspect of mental emotional health is having realistic expectations on ourselves and others. I think usually a lot of conflict or confusion is about, are these my expectations or are they your expectations that I'm perceiving you're putting on me? What is really going on? So, Christine, how do you think you have realistic expectations, and how do you manage that when dealing with yourself and other people?
Okay. I do think that I have realistic expectations, and most of the time, and it's because I'll review it, like I'll think about it and think, I need to look at that. Sometimes life goes, carries on, and I may feel a little bit comfortable or a bit complacent, and so I ask myself questions like, what am I doing in life? What am I meant to be doing? So in that way, I'm reviewing my expectations for myself. Sometimes if someone is talking to me and I'm hearing an expectation of them, actually even sometimes with Paul and myself, he may say something and I'm thinking, oh no, because that expectation it seems far too high. And so when I hear that, I then say, Paul, we need to talk about this so that, let's talk it through so that, we're hearing one another. And that does happen. It's life. And then for others, if I give a thought or guidance upon someone, I think it's a good idea to say, what do you think about that? Is that sitting with you? Ask them some feedback, or they may say, I've heard your idea, I've heard your thought for me, can I get back to you? Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Malcolm, you didn't like this one, did you?
One of them.
Yeah. How are you going with accepting your past and letting it go?
Well, mostly good. But I think in most of our lives there are some things that seem to be a bigger struggle than others, don't you think? The family line I come from, I'm mostly over a lot of the rubbish that I went through. For those who don't know, at 16 and a half, I had to leave the house because my father kicked me out of the home. He said, you either love God or you love me. And I said, well, why? If I love God, I'll love you more. And he basically swore at me and told me to get out of his house. We had a lot of violence in our household. We had a lot of bad things happen. I experienced some things, and some things happened in my family which are just horrific. I've moved through most of that, but there's always going to be an element of sadness, and there's always an element of why did that have to happen, even though I make sense of it, and I found out that for my father, at the boarding school he was at. He was molested and badly hurt by some priests, and he turned against religion. It wasn't just Christianity. If it said religion, it was the worst thing in the world. And unfortunately, when I became a Christian, he had a welding there, or an echo or something, and he decided, I'm a Christian, therefore I'm just like the people who raped him. And that's tragic, and there are some really hard things that happened. I accept a lot of it. I carry some sadness in my life, but I've got to be honest, it's also inspiring, because I like to challenge those concepts. And I like to go to people when they say to me, blah, blah, blah happened, blah, 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 and turn around and say, well, look, is that your problem or someone else's problem, and why are you buying into that? So for me, I am progressing really well in that area. Well, I haven't attempted suicide for a very long time, so there goes an indicator. I think that's a very good indicator.
You just put it out there, don't you?
I just put it out there. At the end of the day, look, if I have no shame in my life.
Yeah.
I've gone through crap. I have survived crap. I should be dead in many ways. One, and I won't go too much, but I had an incident where someone said, you've got 48 hours. If you're dead in 48 hours, you're dead in 48 hours. That's what they said to me, and sent me out from the hospital. They said, 48 hours, if you drop dead, you drop dead. There's nothing we can do because you've poisoned yourself. And so what am I going to do with that? I've got to accept it. Well, what are you going to do about it? You're going to reject me for it? It's not my problem, that's yours. My problem is my problem. Your problem is your problem. And so I have learned to accept that. It's part of my story, it's part of my life. I am here today, and I'm a better person because I went through this darkness.
See, and I think summarising that too is that we all have a past. We do need to accept it. I think the key, whenever I'm working with someone, what I look for there is, can someone recall the past without recoiling into the emotion of that past experience? We can feel sadness, we can grieve, we can understand and look back. It's like driving a car with a rear vision mirror. You look back to learn from the past. You don't control the direction of the car by the rear vision mirror. And when you can recall the past without recoiling into the emotion, then you're in a healthy place. But if you recall the past and you go straight back into that adolescent or that position of being violated and all those emotions, and you feel overwhelmed, that's where you possibly need to talk to someone and start working through that, just to diffuse that some more.
So without pushing, we have to speed up a little bit.
Absolutely.
We're only halfway through and we need to really speed this up. So we're just going to shorten things. You get the idea of the questions and see how we're answering them? So let's plough through the next ones very quickly with shorter answers, guys. Okay,
how are you going with balancing head and heart, or subjective or objective perspectives?
Okay. It's something to be aware of, again. And I know that I can think through things, but also I know that I can have strong emotions. And sometimes I feel the emotions more, and I think, oh yes, that they are guiding me. And if I think, I don't have a peace, I'm a bit troubled, I need to work it through, that's what I do.
Cool.
Yeah.
So objective is factual, subjective is more our emotions, our feelings, our experiences.
Yeah.
It's about balancing the two, not letting one override each other. Cool. Malcolm, do you have a sense of progress and worthwhile goals, or a sense of progression?
You jumped.
Oh, have I? Oh, here we go. I have jumped. I apologise. Yeah. You said push it through. I was trying to.
That's good.
Can't win. How are you going balancing your needs and wants of others?
Well, it's very simple. First of all, to me, you've got to work out where someone can go. The first rule of any good relationship is how trustworthy, how close, what's the intimacy level you can establish with a friend or somebody else, how secure are they, how mature are they? I think that sets a lot of this. So if I've got someone who is damaged and a friend who's been raped or hurt or molested or something like that, as a male, and that's female, you've got to have the boundaries. But if you've got another person, a male who's a real man's man and blah, 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 everything's set by the other person to a degree. So I take myself into that and accept that some people can go deeper in relationship and some people can't. Just accept them for who they are. It's fine.
All right. Christine, one of the biggest issues I come across is understanding trust. How would you define that?
Okay. Well, with trust, I've learned in life that you can't trust everybody, and we can't trust all Christians either. And that's, that is life. Sometimes too, we can let one another down. So it's knowing what trust looks like. For me, I think if I'm going to trust someone, they're going to be a mature person. I know that if I share something, they're not going to share it with everybody else. So I know what it looks like. I know too that, I can't trust everybody. We choose, don't we?
We do.
And again, that's my sovereignty in action.
And the aspect there too is trust is not a one thing. Trust is compartmentalised. So I believe that every person is trustworthy in some area of their life, but no one is trustworthy in every area of their life. And when you understand that, you can trust people with different things and know who not to trust in different areas of your life. So Malcolm, do you have a sense of progress and worthwhile goals?
Yeah, I'm very much goal-driven. In fact, the problem is sometimes I've got so many things I'm focusing on, I've got to reset things sometimes. Goals are important to me for the logical reason that goals help me get to where I am today. When I learnt coming out of my dark place that the only way I was going to do that is by believing in the potential of a future goal. When you've just tried to top yourself off, you actually don't believe in anything. You stop believing in the future, you stop believing in anything, you stop believing in yourself, you stop believing in God's ability to help you, you stop believing and you lose hope. And most people that get to suicide are hopeless. They feel hopeless, I should say. They're not hopeless, they feel hopeless. And so setting goals was the thing that got me through that. And one of the most simplest goals was, I need to see tomorrow. A silly little goal, but believe it or not, that was the first thing that triggered the next goal. I need to improve my relationships and all those things. And so really profound thing is to set a goal and hold the course.
So you're saying you can't climb a ladder if there's no rungs on it?
Correct. Step by step. And look at, you sometimes have to throw away that ladder and get another one. And sometimes the goal's wrong. That's why you need trustworthy people to say, stop being an idiot, you're going up the wrong path. And so,
cool.
Yeah.
All right, Christine, we got 3 more folks, so just hang in there. How are you going with internalised sense of belonging and security?
Okay. When I did the Living Wisdom course, this area really helped me, and so it must have touched on some of the needs within, probably from some of the things that happened in my childhood. So I'm really thankful that I've grown in having belonging. I find my belonging and security more and more in Christ. I think it's really awesome. I think it's a real strength that we have. Sometimes if life goes on and I'm forgetting that truth, I stand on it. And so I'll just give you just a few examples here. Oh wait there, I've got the wrong page. Feeling secure. When I face fears and change and uncertainty, I know I am safe in Christ, that He is with me. See how it gives a lot of security, and it's true. If something bad happens, I know I will be able to cope because I am with Christ and with loved ones, the body of Christ. And again, that is the truth. And so sometimes if I'm emotionally thinking, I'll stand on it. I'll stand on truth.
And if you're not sure where God is in your life, read Psalm 139, because you can't really get away from Him. Malcolm, how are you going with an internalised sense of worth and value, or who defines this for you?
This is the question Christine chose for me. I'm sure this is, look, I'm going to tell you guys blunt. I have 2 levels on this. I know and I have absolute faith in that God sees me in a very special way, and it's wonderful. And in that I'm glad. But if I were to be brutally Malcolm and honest with you, I don't like myself much. I actually don't have a lot of good feelings about who I am as a person. So this is one of my current struggles that I'm going through, and I've shared this with Paul and some others. I live in a way, and I function a particular way, which doesn't always blend well with lots of people. And I get tired of people telling me that I don't fit in, like I don't know. And so even I didn't want to become a pastor. In fact, when I was asked to become a pastor the first time, I rejected it based on this. Because I absolutely think I'm the most incompetent idiot to be a pastor, and I should never be a pastor. And so, no, if you're going to hear it, you're going to hear it. And so I don't do well in this area. Do I have worth and value? Yes, there are people who love me deeply, and I know that. But if you're asking, do I love myself? I respect who God has made me to be. I don't feel warm and fuzzy about that. And that is an area I'm going to be working with David Riddell on this area, because it is an area that I've discovered since going to Living Wisdom, and indeed this year, I have discovered I don't actually like myself much. And every time, and it's not that I care too much about what other people say, but sometimes people say things to me that echo my own thoughts.
Absolutely.
And so when someone says to me, you're too intellectual, I sometimes just want to yell at them and say, well, what do you want me to be, dumb? And then when they say to me, you're too legalistic, or you're too theological and that sort of stuff, I kind of want to yell, okay, let's throw away the Bible and burn it because it's stupid then. And I really struggle with this stuff. And so I have, and you see me revert into that place now, I have real deep problems valuing and worthing myself.
And the indicator there too, as I'll just say, is that when you recognise aspects of your life you don't like, it's not necessarily a tragic or a horrible thing.
No.
Because that allows you to grow.
Yes.
If we think we're perfect, we never grow or go anywhere. So when Malcolm says that, I don't want to rescue him and go, it's okay, mate, it's all right, let's talk.
It's my problem.
That's not what he wants.
Really is my problem.
Malcolm's exposing parts of his journey that he wants to grow with, and I'm actually really comfortable with that, and he's getting good insights, working with David and that now, and it's fantastic. So I look forward to seeing what happens.
Me too.
Last one.
I'm probably very keen.
Yeah. Anyone else want to put up your hand?
Okay.
As if you no, don't do it. So Christine, last one there, number 12 is looking after your body and caring for your body. How do we
cool.
put that in?
Okay, so I listen to my body. That's really wise, isn't it? I think as we grow older, we wise up and start listening to those aches and pains and everything else that happens. Also, caring for myself is not being selfish. So if I think I need time out for myself, that's fine. And it's also like if I go for a walk, that's good for myself, for my body, plus my mind. And then if I care for myself, I can then care for others. Yeah. And also, one other thing is I need to listen to my body because I have got some health issues. And so it's really important to care for myself by listening to it.
Your body will only yell after it's been whispering to you for some time. Yeah. Listen. So just concluding with Malcolm and summarising, we're looking at abundant life. What does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, as you obviously have heard, and I'm going to stand now because I find it hard sitting for too long.
Yeah, I got the comfy seat.
Yeah, you got the cozy seat. So obviously, I've been a bit honest with you guys. I've let you see into my life a bit. In saying that I struggle in these areas, I still absolutely believe, because I know what I used to be, and I may not like myself much now, but I used to hate myself intensely. So I'm actually in a lot better place than I used to be. And so what I find fascinating is this. Jesus turned around and said an interesting thing. He said, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. And often that we turn around and say, oh, that's the devil. Actually, it's not. In context of that scripture, Jesus was talking about Pharisees and Sadducees. And look, the Pharisees and Sadducees in our lives that come to steal from us are some mental health issues, right attitudes, right thinking. In fact, more adequately, bad thinking, bad attitudes, bad self-image, bad understanding of how God sees us. These things can steal from our lives and steal from the value that God sees in us. One of the interesting things about this, if you understand the history that in which Jesus was talking about, was one of the ways thieves used to break into people's houses is they would walk around their old houses with you know those bricks, the clay bricks, and they'd walk around with a stick, and without nobody noticing it, they'd whack the stick against the clay looking for bricks that are weakening. And when they found the weak brick, they would keep tapping it, and then they'd mark it and come back at night or some other time, and they'd keep tapping it until it would break, and then they could enter, because that was the safest way to enter. Mental health issues emotional health issues, if they're wrong in your life, they're bad in your life, that's what it's like. They tap, 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 tap into your life until your building collapses. And that's why we want to do this series. Jesus said, I've come that you may have life and have it in its abundantly. And he wants you to experience an abundant life, but the thief comes to kill and destroy, and the thief sometimes is your own programming, your own thinking, and your own attitudes. But Jesus said, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. And notice there, a true Christian life is dynamic and enhancing in every area where we experience life. And we experience life in our minds. We experience life in our emotions. We experience life in our relationships, in our thinking, in our intellectual pursuits, in our hobby. We experience life everywhere. And so this scripture promises us that he's come to give those areas of life that we live in a better meaning, a fuller expression, something dynamic. And that includes mental well-being. It means becoming and growing and not magically arriving. And this is where I struggle. We'll talk about that next week more. Is when I was going through my stuff, when I came to church and said, I'm struggling with this and struggling, let's pray for it and it'll just go away. It didn't. In fact, I felt like a failure further because it didn't go away. And so there is no magic arriving. It's a process. And the process of growing up in faith and attitudes and behavior is the process of abundant living. Christ bringing life to us constantly. It doesn't say be born again. Look at what it says in the Greek. Be being born again. A constant state of change and growth. And so, team, what's it about? Okay, do you want to push that slide for me? Because it's not going to go for me. What's it about? Or is it frozen? There it is. There are 3 principles I want to leave you with regarding mental health, well-being, and Christianity. Principle 1, correct focus in life. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. Correct focus in life, godliness and contentment, to walk the way God calls us and to see the way God sees us and to be content with all that we have helps better thinking processes. Another way of saying it, you can't have what's not yours. Be grateful for what you do have. And godliness doesn't just mean godliness in some sort of religious sense. The other word there is being effective in living in your faith. Principle 2, we work with God in our growth. For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. That word self-discipline, there goes the Greek, it means of a sound mind, good thinking, self-management, and self-control. Our understanding of good mental health can be summarized in sound mind, good thinking, and self-management and self-control. You could see that as a definition of good, healthy mental living. See what I mean? We work with God because the Spirit God gave us, and there is a debate on it. It is a small s from what I can see. What it means is the life that God breathes in us is for this. And the third principle, God does not create crazy makers. God does not create a crazy life. We do. And so, where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint. If I was to interpret it more accurately in the Aramaic, you'd hear something like this here, where there is no clear definition of what is right and what God desires. People run around naked, because that's what the Aramaic word means. In other words, they behave shamefully. And God does not create shame, we do. We behave badly, not God. And so I love that concept that blessed is the one who heeds wisdom, or wisdom's instruction, because the correction for behaving badly is truth. And the final thought there of principle 3, God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. And that Greek word disorder means instability, disorder, confusion, or tumult. God is not into us being mentally unwell, especially when we're doing it to ourselves, especially when we're doing it to our families and we're doing it to the loved ones around us. That's not God. And if anyone dresses it up as God, then I'm sorry, that's not my God. God's not a God of disorder. He's a God of order, of peace. And so I look around, and that third principle, God does not create crazy makers. We create craziness. And we have to buy into God wanting people to grow and mature and function well together. That's meant to be the community, isn't it? So there's some principles that I've found fascinating in our conversation and indeed in my contemplation. 3 principles. So, final thought is this. And last thing, here we go. I've made it fancy to keep the entertainment going. Here goes my final conclusion. Good mental health is therefore our responsibility. It takes effort. It's part of it is part of Christian maturity, is ongoing, is a sacred duty, is best done in community. Why? Because iron sharpens iron, team. I'm a great believer in arguments. I'm just not a great believer in abuse. I don't believe in abuse. I believe in arguments. Why? Because in a good argument, you sharpen yourself or you find your fault. An argument done well, not abuse. A good discussion in community creates well-being. And is a spiritual exercise for God is the source of a sound mind. You see, good mental health is a spiritual exercise because God is the author of a sound mind. Get it now? So here goes 7 thoughts that I've got. And thank you very much for sharing today. And thank you, Christine, also. That it takes a bit to spill your guts a bit in front of your congregation. You know, being a pastor, I'm meant to be perfect. Oh, sorry, being a reverend.
Yeah.
Oh, no, don't go there. That's a dark place for me. It's fine, I'm just Malcolm, okay? Yeah. So, I just want to say tonight, Mike, we're going to discuss together similarly this toxic religion stuff. Why is toxic religion important to you? Why should we bother?
I think the way I put it just for time is that these are, I think I'm working.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Is these are like, when we talk about toxic religion, they are ideas that actually exist in the framework of many churches, even modern churches today, that people haven't recognised and have never discussed. And it causes a lot of pain. Most of my clients that come through my office have been damaged and hurt by ideas and concepts presented by the church. And these are ideas that most of you, I think, would never have been addressed with. So if you want to come along and have your world shaken up, it'll be a good time to do it.
So that's at 6 p.m. tonight. It's casual. We finish by 7:30, but you're welcome to come to that. And finally, we're going to run next year another School of Living Wisdom course. I'm hoping to do that early in the year. We're going to do it like we did last time, which we did over how many days?
There was 2 days.
It's a 2-day short course on a lot of this stuff. So we'll let you know, congregation, when that's coming. But we are going to run that again. I'd like to encourage us all to participate. We did one last year. We're going to do it again this year. And Mike will be here for that. We're going to conclude now and just do the benediction or the blessing because we've done enough and it is time. Look, I hope you found this of value. It's been good. And I deliberately allowed myself to be vulnerable to you guys because a lot of you guys come to me and be vulnerable to me. You need to get permission. You're allowed to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not a problem. By the way, most of us are broken inside. We just pretend very much that we're not. We've just got different degrees of different issues. So, Mike, thank you very much. It is once again an honour and a privilege, and we will have another bit of fun tonight. Christine, thank you for your honesty. It takes courage and guts, and thank you. Let's stand together. Lord, our God, we live in a broken, fallen world, and in a broken, fallen world, we get broken and we fall ourselves. I am fascinated by this one expression that we have of our Saviour. He did not come to break a bruised reed. You did not come to condemn the sinner, but to set them free. You didn't come to break a broken person, but to bring healing. You didn't come to destroy a prostitute or a harlot or a person in immorality. You came to restore them back to God and find a new purity in their lives so that they can be true to who they are in you. You did not come to condemn us for our stupidity, but rather to bring life so that we could live more abundantly. Forgive us when we dump our crap on other people, Lord, because we do. It's funny, you didn't do that. The church is meant to be more than this, but we often condemn each other. Forgive us for that. May God, who is infinitely perfect, walk with each of us. May we all take up the cross and follow Jesus daily. It is not a cross of shame. It is not a cross of brokenness for us. It's a cross of transformation and redemption. May we walk with you, Lord, in the night and in the day. And may we hold to this reality that whoever goes with God never goes alone. Bless us as we serve you. It is an honour to know you and an honour to call upon your name. In Jesus' name, and my brothers and sisters said, Amen. May God bless you all.